Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. I want to thank you for being with us. Breaking news tonight in the desperate search for a beautiful 3-year-old Florida girl, Kelly. A Florida grand jury hands down a multi-count indictment against mom Casey Anthony, including murder 1.
First and foremost, I would like to make it clear that we are not here to rejoice in today's grand jury indictment. We are, however, pleased that the ladies and gentlemen serving on that jury were able to hear the evidence presented to them and arrive at an informed conclusion based strictly on the evidence that was presented to them.
Obviously, I know, and you know, that everything you told me is a lie, correct?
Not everything that I told you.
Okay, pretty much everything that you told me, including where Kaylee is right now.
That I don't know where she is.
Sure you do. And
I absolutely do not know where she is.
I would again ask you and employ all of you to try and understand what Casey is going through, and to understand that we have been preparing from day one for the very worst, because that's my job, and I wouldn't be doing her a proper service if I didn't prepare her for probably what's going to go down today.
Well, let's go through this again. We're here because we got here how? To do what?
Because I lied.
Speaking directly as a father, a day doesn't pass where I wish the evidence we have gathered in this case didn't add up to the painfully obvious. Sadly, I cannot change the facts surrounding this investigation. The grand jury has concluded that little Kaylee is deceased and their daughter has been indicted in her death.
To Jessica D'Onofrio with WKMG. Jessica, give us the latest.
Well, Nancy, it only took 30 minutes for this grand jury to decide that Casey Anthony should be charged with first-degree murder. Now, that charge does carry the death penalty in this state, and State Attorney Lawson Lamar, he was able to convince at least 12 of the 19 jurors that this should go to trial. So this is a big twist in the case. This is a major event here, obviously, that doesn't even need to be said. But as you like to say, Nancy, a major bombshell today.
To Mark Williams with WNDB News Radio 1150. Explain to me what went down today.
Well, what went down was at least 12 of those jurors said they indicted her on first-degree murder, which is a capital case here in the state of Florida. Also, 1 count of child abuse, 1 count of aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of lying to police officers. That's the big thing.
To Nikki Pierce with WDBO, who were the witnesses at grand jury?
Who were the witnesses?
Yes.
Well, first and foremost, George Anthony, who spoke for over an hour, and he made a statement beforehand saying that he was not happy to be doing it, but he did testify. Also, we heard from FBI agents, from forensic investigators, from the Orange County lead investigator, Yuri Melich.
And Jessica D'Onofrio, in what order did they go before the grand jury? How long were they testifying?
They started, Nancy, at about 9 o'clock this morning. They heard from about half a dozen witnesses. They went through to lunch. They broke for lunch. They came back at around 1 p.m. and then they heard from about 2 more witnesses after that. So there were quite a few hours of testimony there, and about 3:30 in the afternoon, that's when we heard that the grand jury had made a decision on this. That's when we were all called in to the chambers, and that's when we heard that she was going to be charged with the capital offense.
And what do we know, Mark Williams with WNDB, whether the state will seek the death penalty?
Right now, State Attorney Lawson Lamar says he has not made a decision whether Casey will undergo the death penalty or just life in prison. That still has yet to be determined, Nancy.
We are taking your calls live. We're about to unleash the lawyers. Explain to me, Mark Williams, what happened when police were tailing Mom Cindy Anthony with Casey Anthony in the car?
Unbelievable. Another bombshell for you. First off, Casey Anthony was at her attorney's office in Kissimmee. She got into a car driven by her mother, Cindy. They started back on the 417 and got near what they call Boggy Creek Road, which is near the Orlando International Airport, just south of the airport. Cindy pulls underneath an underpass. That's where Casey gets out. gets into a gray SUV, and that SUV takes off. Undercover agents trailing all this finally pulled the SUV over. We don't know if she was trying to make the great escape to a nearby county or what, and we don't know who the driver was of that SUV. Right now, she's being booked into the Orange County Jail here in Orlando. First appearance tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. sharp.
And what will that appearance be about?
Basically, the reading of the charges. Her attorney will be there, she'll be there, and she'll be scooted back to her jail cell.
I noticed that in the press conference, you're seeing video of it right now of Casey Anthony speaking beside her attorney to Leonard Padilla. She breaks down in tears. What do you make of it?
Well, I got to tell you, Nancy, that's the first time, and I haven't seen it yet because I just got back from a convention up at Lake Tahoe, but that's the first time that I've heard anybody tell me that she broke down and cried during the whole situation that I've been involved in. And what it tells me is that the reality might be soaking in, and maybe Jose might have a shot of reality at this stage of the game.
Joining us right now, an exclusive guest this evening, Mark Nijame. He's joining us from Orlando, Florida. He is the attorney for grandparents George and Cindy Anthony. Mr. Nijame, a trial veteran. Sir, thank you for being with us.
Good evening, Nancy.
I understand at the outset that you cannot comment on George Anthony's testimony before the grand jury today, but I would like to hear an explanation as to why your client Cindy Anthony changed her daughter out of the car into another car under an overpass.
I'm not sure that's what happened at all. In all honesty, I was dealing with George throughout the day, and I have not spoken to Cindy. I've only spoken to George today. It was, as you can imagine, a pretty amazing day emotionally for him, and so that's where the attention was. And then I spoke to him late afternoon and then simply left the office and have called and have not spoken to either of them later this evening.
Mr. Nijame, your client, George Anthony, repeatedly stated that he was not concerned about the grand jury testimony because he would not be testifying against his daughter.
Well, I'm not sure about that, Nancy, because you can surely see that something quite different happened today. The reality of it is that George Anthony stood up and was honest and answered every question posed to him. We can, of course, not get into the contents of that, but the reality of it is that he realized that this is what he needed to do, and he did it. And it took an incredibly courageous act for him to do so. To testify against your own daughter, who's accused of murdering her daughter, your beloved granddaughter, is an act of courage that I've rarely seen or witnessed in my life.
Well, Mr. Nijame, it may very well be that him believing he was telling the truth would not be damning. But throughout this ordeal, your client, George Anthony, seemed to be the most realistic and the most cooperative with cops. Very quickly, back to Jessica D'Onofrio. What did you believe was the crux of Anthony's testimony to the grand jury, Jessica?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Nancy.
What was Anthony's testimony to the grand jury?
Well, George Anthony was brought here today as the only family member to speak and testify against his daughter. He obviously knew a lot about her behavior, and he knew the last time he saw that child alive. So his testimony probably held a lot of weight today.
My focus is always on my granddaughter. It always will be. I love my daughter. I love my wife. I love my son. I want everyone to have prayer for all of us today, especially for my granddaughter.